I look at that and think that's great if you got an hour track practice. It's not great when you got an hour workout. And that hour workout has to include jumps and sprints and strength and all these things that have got to be gotten in there. And I think that's why I've always kind of sat about track and field stuff. And I've always kind of said, be careful. I think at one point I said, don't copy track coaches. And then I think now I'd probably say, be careful copying track coaches, because track coaches have a lot of time for track stuff, right? Conditioning coaches don't have that time.
Hey everybody, I'm your host, Anthony Renna. This is episode 421 of the Strength Coach Podcast. We're talking about relevant topics with top coaches in the fitness industry to help you become a better coach, trainer, therapist, or business owner. We're brought to you by Perform Better, the experts in functional training and rehabilitation. A lot of education going on at the Perform Better Functional Training Institute. That's in Rhode Island. They have a little gym area set up. They have a lecture area set up. So you kind of can move back and forth. But this week, actually, they have a speaker school coming up. And then there is a movement workshop coming up as well. They also align themselves with other events, like there is a fascia summit that's coming up. I think that's in April. And then they're also doing another business workshop coming up in the winter. You can check all that out at performbetter.com. While you're there, check out the digital catalog. So if you don't get one in the mail, you can just go on there and kind of page through on the website. It's pretty cool. It's just like going through the real one. And there's always something on sale. So make sure you check out the sale button at the top at performbetter.com. All right, today I have on Coach Boyle. We spoke about pogo jumps. What are they? Do they have a place in strength and conditioning? Should they just be in track and field programs? In his program, are they even there? And is the juice worth the squeeze? We're going to talk about programming single leg exercises with other single leg exercises. This also comes from a forum post on strengthcoach.com. And we're going to finish up with upper body power, kind of combine two threads, the plyo-bench press. So somebody showed a video of some really fast bench presses. And then somebody else asked, but they needed alternatives to med ball training, so they couldn't do some med ball training. So we're going to talk about that. For the business, for Unicorns Fitness Business Power Play, we got Mark Fisher back on. He's going to talk about a problem a lot of us have, and that is overwhelm, especially if you do own a facility. And Mark is actually a master at time management. He's done a lot of hosted a lot of courses on it. He's got a lot of knowledge, does a great job with it. And today's going to give you a strategy to free up some time. So also this week, they're doing their webinar, The Missing Piece, Consistently Excellent Training Sessions, September 18th, 4 p.m. Eastern with Kevin Carr and Brendan Rarick. Not too late to sign up. Those are the guys from the Certified Functional Strength Coach team. And it's free. And the link will be in the show notes. Check out businessforunicorns.com. There's a ton of free resources for you there. Let's check out Mark Fisher right now.
Welcome to the Business for Unicorns Fitness Business Power Play. In each segment, we give you one actionable tip, strategy, or tactic that you can use to build a fitness business and a life you love. And if you find value in this segment and you want even more free business building resources, you can go to businessforunicorns.com or click the link in the show notes below. So today I want to talk about a common issue that a lot of people have as humans in the world, but certainly fitness professionals, gym owners, trainers, strength coaches, and that is feeling overwhelmed. Like there's always so much more to be done than we can get done. And this is true. I think it feels like the case almost for everybody in the year 2025. And God forbid you have a business and you have small children home, which I do too. Time is really at a premium, and a lot of people in our industry are overwhelmed. So I want to give you one quick way of thinking about this, one exercise you can do, and a strategy to free up some more time. So at the end of the day, there are some things that you do in a given week that are more valuable than other things, right? And oftentimes, if I'm working with a gym owner or fitness professional, they're feeling overwhelmed, the first thing I'm going to have them do is something called a time audit. I'm going to have them just make a list of everything that they do on a repeating basis on a typical week and start to understand, okay, what are the things that are happening every single week? I'll then have them guesstimate about how much time are they spending on a given tactic or task. And then I want them to assess on a scale of 1 to 4, how valuable is that for the business? And I think what you'll see is a lot of fitness professionals and gym owners fall into the trap of what Jim Rohn would call majoring in the minors, which is to say, if I look at your schedule, if I look at your list of items, there's a lot of things that you're doing that maybe need to get done, but aren't particularly valuable and don't really need to be done by you. Even if you're just an independent trainer and let's say you're on the floor 22 hours per week on average right now, but you have to spend a lot of time doing administrative stuff. Maybe you're dealing with tax paperwork, maybe responding to very simple queries for people that are interested in your services. There's probably a lot of things you could get some help in outsourcing, right? But you can't really do that until you take all the Legos and dump them on the table and take a look at what it is you're doing on a repeating basis every day and every week. And it is almost without fail, every time I do this exercise, the fitness professional, the gym owner is able to look at a number of things they're doing, and they're things that they don't want to be doing. They're things that are not particularly valuable. And here's the important thing. They can outsource for a pretty low hourly amount, right? Because you got to think, let's say if you're a trainer and you make, depending on your market, let's say $70, $90, $110 per hour. Well, if you are too overwhelmed to give great service in an hour, or in some cases, even take on another client because you're too busy doing administrative stuff like answering emails or handling bookkeeping or dealing with some kind of paperwork minutia, well, that's a mistake to my mind, right? Because it's not that expensive to look for help. Now, if you do find some things that get off your plate, where you're going to go to for help will depend on what kind of business you run and what sort of assets and resources you have, right? So if you already have a gym, there might be people on your team that you could pretty easily, effectively next week, start to get some things off of your plate. If you don't have a gym, now maybe we're looking to hire some super, super part-time help. And sometimes that can even be done with a client that you're willing to do a little bit of barter. This works particularly well if you have a group training model and you have a client that otherwise wouldn't be able to afford your services, but is awesome and wants to work with you. Now, keep in mind, if you do engage somebody in that sort of capacity, there's some risk there. You really need to vet that this is actually the right person, not the person that's convenient. But remember, a lot of the things we're talking about here are low-level administrative tasks. If you have a facility, another great thing to outsource is there's all sorts of physical things that need to happen that don't necessarily need to be done by you, right? This could be anything from cleaning to restocking merchandise to opening up mail to doing a Kinko's run to putting up or taking down seasonal decorations. Again, these are all great things to be done. They just don't need to be done by you. Now, if you're dealing with digital tasks, the great news is in today's day and age, it's never been easier to find some help for people to handle that for you. There are all sorts of agencies that have both domestic and offshore help that may or may not be the right fit for you, depending on what it is you're looking to do. But at a minimum, I think it's very easy to feel overwhelmed. And it's very easy to feel trapped when you're running a fitness business, particularly if it's just you or you have a small staff. It feels like there's just more to get done than you can possibly do. And that's true. But I think too often people underappreciate how relatively easy it would be if you just think critically, just start that time audit, analyze the things that you're currently doing, look for things that somebody else could do for a cheaper hourly rate than you can make doing things like training clients, or in some cases, building the business, which is arguably the most valuable thing you can do if you're the gym owner. And then you can look for resources and you can look for people to help you out. Now, if I can be helpful to you in sourcing some options for you or thinking through that, you can email me at mark@businessforunicorns.com. Or if you're interested in having a call with someone on my team to understand how we help gym owners create more income, more impact, or more freedom, you can go to go.businessfunicorns.com/brainstorm, or you can click the link in the show notes. So as always, I hope you found a lot of value in today's segment, and I'll see you next time for the Business Unicorns Fitness Business Power Play.
All right, guys, now it's time for the shrinkcoach.com and MBSC.TV Coaches Corner with Coach Boyle. Shrinkcoach.com, articles, videos, and the longest running forum in strength and conditioning and fitness. Got a couple topics from the forum today. You can try it out for 7 days for free. Go to shrinkcoach.com to start your free trial. MBSC.TV, you're a fly on the wall at MBSC. Staff meetings, programs, seminars, and in-services from top coaches. You can try it out for 7 days for free as well at MBSC.TV. Coach, how you doing?
I am doing well, Anthony. How are you?
All right, all right. Hockey season's coming, so for me, it's a big deal. I know it's really, I don't follow any other sport.
You got your Miracle on Ice hat
I,
on with your Islanders shirt.
yeah,
You are ready to go.
I got my little Islander plaque still over here, come on. I'm ready to go. So, yeah, I really do. I always get excited, obviously this time of year. So, and it's a chance to kind of renew, get back out on the ice too. And I get going because I listen to our own advice. I tell everybody, you got to take a break. You got to take a break. I took August off from skating and it was killing me. Because, I mean, I'm only back 11 months now, right? So, or a year. I'm back a year and I want to go out there all the time, but it's hard. It's hard. I get it. But I had to feel my client's pain of taking off. So, um, Mike, let's go over, we actually have a few, forum topics here. One was pogo jumps. Okay. So just wanted to, just so everybody knows, like, so what, what they are, why people would use them and who you would use them with, but you don't really use them. Explain why as well.
I don't know. I just don't get them. I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
There's other things that I would rather do when I look and think that you're going to sort of do these. I guess, very double-legged, very kind of ankle-centric, low bouncy kind of movements. I kind of look at it and think, okay, why, when I'm getting at similar stress, when I'm skipping, when I'm all the other things that I'm doing are giving
Yeah.
me that kind of rhythmic bouncing action. So I look at it. I think we do a lot of stuff because it gets popular, whether that's pogos or RDLs or I think when you see stuff coming up on the internet, you tend to look and think, why am I not doing that? Why, I got to put that in my workout. Whereas I go from the opposite perspective and I think, why should I put that in my workout? What is that? Because we always kind of go back to the bucket analogy, right? I mean, it's always about
Hmm.
the buckets, but I'm like, what bucket is that filling for me that wasn't being filled before? And I don't see one. So I just look at it and think, I've got my guys on my feet. We're getting bouncy. We're doing things, whether it's ladder drills, whatever it is. It's not as if we're not addressing foot and ankle a lot, but
Yeah.
I just look at pogos and think, I guess I get Shakespearean. Much ado about nothing, right?
Yeah. I find it also, I don't know, you would know better because you've had obviously a lot more experience with this, but I feel like it's an awkward move. That's not the easiest thing to teach and that not everybody gets and they don't feel like bang for your buck. It's not really worth the effort of teaching, of trying to get people to go through it. And also I feel like there's a little bit of risk in that move.
I mean, I don't know how I would say the risk to me, the risk is more the overuse. Uh,
Mm,
but
okay.
but I do think, yes, kind of again, you get into sort of I think when you look at a rhythmic bilateral exercise, in my mind, I always get the question mark. Why? Why would I want to do a rhythmic bilateral exercise when I could do rhythmic unilateral exercise? So if I look at skipping, just kind of a skipping in the warm up, I can look at that and think, I know why I'm doing that. I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, I'm doing it. I like you go kind of, you go into the Altus stuff, rhythm, projection, those kind of things. Hey, yeah, so I'm getting some rhythm. I'm getting somebody used to putting force into the ground. I'm getting somebody to think about the opposition of kind of foot down, knee up. All that stuff makes sense to me in terms of running, in terms of sprinting. Pogos, I look and think it's just a kind of, I guess it's more ankle centric, bilateral. And like you said, people don't always get it. Then you kind of get into, all right, am I pogoing? Is it a stiff pogo? Is it whole foot? Am I trying to bounce? Should I be in more on my toes? And then you kind of look like you said, I don't think a lot of people do it well. And I think it's another one of those track things that you kind of look at and think, uh, and again, Altus does do that stuff. Altus will do their, Dan calls it his rudiment series, which does involve a lot of this bouncy stuff. But I look at that and think that's great if you got an hour track practice. It's not great when you got an hour workout. And that hour workout has to include jumps and sprints and strength
Yeah.
and all these things that have got to be gotten in there. And I think that's why I've always kind of fence sat about track and field stuff. And I've always kind of said, be careful. I think at one point I said, don't copy track coaches And then I think now I'd probably say be careful copying track coaches, because track coaches have a lot of time for track stuff, right? Conditioning coaches don't have that time.
Yeah.
So
I feel like we lump them into our like their strength and conditioning. We don't say watch what sport coach the hockey coach is doing or the football coach is doing and say, yeah, we're going to start doing that too. And it seems like when we look at track, obviously it's a different animal, but because they're sprinting, so we kind of take them as, I want to say equals, but equals, right? It's like we don't do that with any other sport.
no, and I think, and the whole point for me is that I look at it and think it's warm up. Okay, it's warm up. As long as you've got a warm up and you understand what your warm up is, and your warm up is purposeful, and you're not, and I would look at it and say, hey, if I was having a lot of foot and ankle issues, if I was having a lot of ankle sprains or a lot of Achilles tendon issues or a lot of plantar fascia issues, I might look at it and say, maybe I need to go back and look at pogos, because maybe I'm not filling that bucket. But that's not happening. We don't have that. We don't see that. So I
Yeah.
think when you look at sport, team sport, invasion sport, whatever we want to talk about it, what do we get? We get groin pull, hamstring pull, right? I mean, that's team invasion sport. And it was even funny because a guy the other day on, I might have been on my Instagram, said, well, there's been a lot of Achilles injuries uh, in sport. And I said, no, they really haven't. There's been some high profile Achilles injuries, but there hasn't been a lot. If you
Yeah.
look at basketball, he's like, well, three guys. He said, three guys that all wear number 0 all got hurt. I said, I know. I said, and that's really unfortunate. They're all really good players, but I don't think that necessarily represents a trend in the NBA. It's just three guys who happen to be really prominent in the NBA that all ruptured their Achilles. All of them did it while playing with a strained Achilles or a strained calf or whatever it was. And there's sort of some, you can look at that and connect the dots a little bit, but I think what we see in our sports world much more, hamstring pulls, groin pulls. So that's where my emphasis is going.
Yeah, I wasn't sure, like with kind of some of Ken Vick's ideas. I know you listened to the episode. You kind of go back and forth a little once in a while with him on Twitter, and just some of his thoughts on the stretch shortening cycle continuum. Now, if that kind of change, hey, when you look at that, if there was an empty bucket within that continuum, I wasn't sure if you were starting to look at
Yeah,
that.
but I would look at it for me, and that's why I like Ken stuff. The empty bucket's way at the other end in terms of, there was some of that today on Twitter with Eamon Flanagan too. In that depth jump, drop jump kind of. I think that for us is where we were missing a piece. But I think the little bouncy warm up part, which
Yeah,
is where pogos kind of fall to me, I don't feel like that was where we were missing a piece.
yeah.
No.
Okay, cool. And speaking of the strengthcoach.com forum, this is another one that was from the forum and kind of combining NBSC.TV because it was part of a staff meeting actually that you guys were discussing. Kevin was saying this. Somebody had posted which of the 4 to 5 exercises, which really your old big 4, which are really, you said your big 3, one leg squat, skater squat, one leg SLDL. What's not good to pair together in one session based on muscle activation? And Kevin had said he would pair SLDL with a knee dominant variation. And then he had asked, what's your opinion about rear foot elevated squat as a quad dominant, but a skater squat as a hip dominant in the same session? So can you just kind of expand on that, what you talked about in the meeting and what's coming up there?
Well, it's interesting. What we talked about in the meeting more was going back to rear foot elevated squat. And what we've realized now is that we need to kind of surf this one leg squat area, because when we go hard at one, then people start figuring out how to angle that one. And then the solution to that tends to be one of the other ones. So you look and think, we got away from rear foot elevated maybe now 5 years ago, because it just was becoming this sort of ugly two-legged grind. And I think we've talked about that
Yeah.
on the podcast before, in terms of people were just trying to figure out, how do I do it with more weight? And that actually meant probably a lot more pulling with the back leg and a lot of stuff, which may have led to people, the McGill idea about pelvic ring. It may have been stuff there, because rear foot elevated split squat should be, as I like to describe it. It should be like an outrigger canoe. That back foot should be hanging out there for balance, shifting the weight, greater weight load on the front leg, but you shouldn't be using that back leg. You shouldn't be pulling. You shouldn't be in a really super extended position. There's a lot of ways you shouldn't be. And we were just finding, looking at people, and they were just thinking, how do I get the 120s up for 5 reps? Do you know what I mean? Like that was it. And so you'd kind of look at it, and after you watch the set, you thought, that is not really what I had in mind for that exercise. So we got away from that. We went back to the kind of the true one leg squat. When we went back to one leg squat, we wanted to guarantee depth. So we kind of came up with this 2 box system, 6-inch box, 18-inch box. And then we were like 18-inch box plus an Eric's pad. And then what we got is people bouncing off the box. And then we went to one leg squat standing on the box, and then people don't go as deep. And now we're like, hey, let's go back to rear foot elevated split squat again. So I think the answer probably in many ways is that there isn't anything that's perfect. And that was why it was funny, because we were talking about, I posted pictures of Shay Maloney doing trap bar deadlift and skater squat, because I think we get into like the skater squat thing is still called squat, but it's hip dominant really when you kind of look at it. So you start looking and thinking, hey, if I'm going to do 2 things in a day, not necessarily even paired, but if I'm going to do 2 lower body exercises, I'm probably going to do skater squat and one leg squat. And then I'm probably going to do, say, rear foot elevated split squat and one leg straight leg deadlift. And the more interesting thing about it, I think, with some of these guys is how much they almost overthink some of these things. And it's kind of a situation where you look at it and say, let's just take one that seems to be a little more knee dominant. That's one exercise we're going to do that day. Let's take one that seems to be a little more hip dominant. Let's do that day. I wouldn't, and I didn't even get into that in that thread, but I wouldn't necessarily ever pair them anyway. But it's more what's going to be done in the same workout. So if you look at, for us, it's like trap bar deadlift, one leg squat, and then maybe skater squat, one leg straight leg deadlift. So you kind of end up almost with 3 hip dominants. And then you start looking at that and thinking, oh, should I juggle that around? But now I look at it and think, if I'm going to get 4 things done in a week, let's just say I'm getting 4 lower body exercises done, 4 primary lower body exercises, those are probably the 4 I want. So, and that's also probably the way I'd pair them or match them up in a given day of a workout. It's also why I've started to like the 3-day program more, because I start to look at that and think, gee, I'd still love to figure out, can I get rear foot elevated split squat in there? Can I get slide board lunge in there? I'm just finding that I have more lower body options than I can figure out how to incorporate into 2 days. So a 4-day workout.
Yeah.
Whereas in a 3-day workout, now I've got 3 total body days. Therefore, I have 3 lower body days, right? And whereas in a 4-day workout, I have 2 lower body days. And so some people, I think it gets confusing because thinking like, well, you got 4 days. Why does it mean you can't, and it's like, well, the 4-day really is chest, shoulder, tricep, legs, and back. I hate describing it in the bodybuilding terms. I think it makes it a little more obvious for the average person who's looking at it. Whereas the 3-day workout is just total body, total body, total body. So
Dr. House used to say everybody lies. Mike Boyle says everybody cheats. He used to say good athletes cheat. Mike, I think if you get a scale, right? Like I think Paul Chek used to put like a blood pressure cuff underneath somebody's back to make sure they didn't move their spine. You can maybe they have to go down, because I know what you're saying. I think there's a lot of people when we do a floating heel step down, and tell everybody do not put any weight on that bottom foot, and they do it anyway. So to your point, it's like they're always finding a way to kind of almost cheat that.
Oh yeah. Well, that's one of the reasons for a long time we didn't do step ups at all, because, and now we were talking about that in the staffing today. We're having that problem. We put step ups back in the workout, and all of a sudden you've got people doing step ups with too much weight, and they're doing not even the floating heel, but I always call it the sneak the foot on the top in terms of the box. So they push down in the box a little bit, and then they sneak the other foot up, and it'd be like, "Oh, see, I got up here," and it's like, "Nah, you didn't
Yeah.
really."
What about Mike? What about? I know it sounds weird, but just changing it to calling it a step down, so you're starting
Well,
up top.
we've done that. we've done that too. And that's what I had suggested the other day. I said, maybe we go more to the step down idea. But it also, and this was the other thing we talked about in the staff meeting, what it really comes down to is coaching. It comes down to saying, hey, this is what we want to have happen. This is how I want you to do it. I want you to squash it. And what I had said is don't let them put their free foot, their foot on the floor, don't let them put it on the box. Because when we let them put it on the box, they sort of have that moment of being on one leg, push down through, and then they sneak the other foot up on top of the box.
Yeah, yeah.
So if you just push down through, you eliminate that. Or if you go to step down, and it's really funny, but we're going through all of these. This is where Jess is so good. Jess, we're playing with all these different variations of these single leg exercises. And what you really try to do is find one. Remember the book Made to Stick? You try to find something that's sticky. You try to find something where you think, hey, that really works well. But what we also find is that whatever works well doesn't work well forever. It works well, and then eventually people get better and better at beating the system, better and better at figuring out how do I cheat on that exercise. And so I think, and this is what I used to do back in my very early days at BU. I would kind of look at, okay, what is our mistake? What's everybody doing wrong? And then what's an exercise that we can do that will make them not do that thing wrong? Or in some cases, what's everybody doing wrong? And then if it was everybody who's doing an exercise, in my mind, wrong, okay, let's not do that exercise. That was high pulls for us. High pulls were really popular kind of in the Olympic community, or clean pulls or high pulls or whatever it was. But no matter how much we tried to teach it, everybody tried to cheat it. Everybody wanted to get more weight on the bar, and it kind of became sort of a drop power shrug where they were kind of heave it up and then kind of try to go down and meet it. And you were just running around coaching. No, 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 don't do that, not that, not that, don't do this, don't. And after a while, I was like, okay, why don't we just not do pulls anymore? We're just not going to, because we're spending way too much time trying to coach out the cheating. So let's find more exercises. And this is when I go back. I hate to give him credit for anything, but I can remember Vern saying, try to develop exercises that makes the person do what you wanted them to do. And I remember thinking about that and saying, that makes a lot of sense. So if I can find an exercise and say, okay, for a while we'd call them sternum chin-ups, because we'd get a lot of people they wouldn't get their chin over the bar. So we said, okay, we're going to do a cycle of sternum chin-ups where you had to touch your sternum to the bar. That was the objective. And you weren't doing the exercise if you weren't trying to touch your sternum to the bar. The only reason we did that was because we wanted to get better at chin-ups, and we wanted more people to get their chin over the bar and to use their back and use their scapular retractors. But we would kind of develop exercises like that. We started doing what we called high hang cleans, which are now we would call position 1 in our hang clean progression. But initially, because it was, okay, we just want people to pop the bar and get underneath it. And then when we realized how many guys weren't getting under the bar, we started doing squat cleans. So we started teaching them actually to squat clean, because we thought, oh, we got a lot of guys now who, and at one point we had too many guys catching too deep a squat. Then we get to the point where everybody was catching the bar too high, and we wanted to catch the squat more. So I think you're just going through and placing exercises in that help you correct errors.
Let's move on to, there was a couple that I felt were related. Plyo-bench press. So it was a video somebody showed, and the guy was just kind of cranking out these bench press, these barbell bench really fast. And I think there's other ways to do that. There's machines to be able to do kind of those fast bench presses now that are completely safe. But then there was another thread, alternative to med balls. So where do we, when we don't, and I don't know why they can't just do a chest pass. I mean, I catch it with everybody, but even if you have partners and you're throwing across the gym, if you have a little bit of room, or doing the chest pass to the ground, slams, everybody can do those. But those two kind of seem related. Like, okay, a plyo bench press, somebody's looking obviously for an alternative to upper body power. And then this other person needs to find an alternative to med balls, and we don't want them to kind of go into what they saw with that video that he posted.
I don't like any of the lifts where you're trying to do a lift that was intended to be done slow, fast. Because I think there's a reason the exercise was done slow. And the reason it was meant to be done slow is because it probably wasn't safe fast. And so when you look at that bench press, that whatever, plyo bench press, or however, whatever they want to call it, I look at that and think that's not good for your shoulders. Over the long run, that person is going to develop a shoulder problem. The anterior shoulder is not made for that force coming out the front. You've got and your hip to some degree is similar, but your shoulder really has a very small, flimsy anterior capsule. And when you start smacking things off your chest that way, you're messing with that, and you're probably going to have some problems. You're trying to stabilize that, so you're causing your rotator cuff to overwork. There has to be better ways, as you said, medicine ball bench press, kind of, wall medicine ball. And that, I think the problem, some people say we don't have a wall, but as you were saying, you could lie on the floor and drop the ball, and someone can medicine ball bench press it up to you. You can slam down into the floor, kind of from a 45-degree trunk angle. There are ways to get that explosive upper body stuff without what they were calling plyo bench press, which was just awful. And that's where the VBT stuff comes in. But the problem with VBT, and this is still my problem with VBT, is that people have to learn to control the eccentric on the VBT. So VBT is not about, initially when we started to play with this stuff, I can remember Eric Cressy had put it into one of his things, and we tried timing like 5-second bench press. What's the most reps you can get in 5 seconds? But the problem with that is that what we wanted was fast concentric, but what we got was fast eccentric and fast concentric. Whereas if you have a VBT device, you have a Vitruva or one of those things, now you can really think control speed, and I think that's the big advantage of VBT. The disadvantage of VBT is just the logistics of, one, it only works with a barbell, which isn't particularly super convenient because you've got to be able to, then you've got to hook it on the bar. Then you've got to look at the transducer. Then you've got to have an iPad. Then, there's a lot of moving parts to that. So then I always end up back with med balls and even heavier med balls. So we've tried to that's where the only time we use our heavy med balls is when we have upper body power work, and we start looking, and now we're into 16, 18, 20-pound balls, and you just got to be careful. That's why I like the soft toss balls, because the other thing that you get, particularly with med ball bench press, is people will drop the balls in people's faces. I mean, we've had lots of incidents of that. None of them particularly bad, but if you had hard balls versus soft, you could get some, even in the best case scenario, some fat lips or some broken noses.
Well, what I've been doing instead of that, because I just don't trust it, but I don't trust myself either. But I put somebody on like a bench, so it's like the 30-degree, right? So they're back, and they have to throw it not straight up, but it's kind of straight up for them, and technically it's getting thrown to me. Yeah, right? Yeah. Because of the angle. So I'm trying to do just something different with that. But have you ever tried? I know it's just an assisted push-up. So the Mark Bell Slingshot, it goes on your arms over to your chest. It just kind of takes the load off. I used it because I was having some shoulder problems. I wanted to check it out, and some elbow issues. Man, I love that thing. You're able to get some like fast push-ups. It's not the same as a push-up because you can bang out 25 like no problem. And then, but they're all pretty fast. So I was thinking, oh, this is kind of replacing a little bit of that. It's assisted, but it's a little bit of, it's not resisted at all, but it's helping. It's not so bad like when you come down either. So it's kind of absorbing you a little bit and then sending you.
I've tried them bench pressing because that's what they're originally for.
Yeah.
I haven't done them for push-ups. I'm just really, and again, I always get kind of the rap of I'm overcautious, but I'm very sensitive to the anterior shoulder thing. Maybe because I've had shoulder issues forever and have had shoulder surgery, and I just think it's really easy in the sort of bench press oriented world to get your shoulders a little bit flared up. So,
Sure.
so I tend to err on the side of caution, which 90% of the time means we're doing red ball stuff.
Yeah. And if you can, you can. I mean, you already have them. So I don't have a wall, but I have to catch it for one-on-one. But if I have 3 people, it'd be better if I had a wall to be able to do that, because I do train, small groups sometimes. But good stuff. All right, Coach. Thank you so much. Thanks for doing this. And we'll talk to you next time.
All right, Anthony. It is always a pleasure. Thank you.